Hey, welcome back again to Spooky Bricks. This time around we'll be looking at my mock of the Daniel Bray house of Salem, Massachusetts. The Daniel Bray house is one of Salem's many iconic black houses. Although that wasn't always the case, up until about 10 years ago it looked like this. Daniel Bray built the house for his family in 1766, but by the early 1900s, it became a storefront, and it kept that look until the Peabody Essex Museum started to restore it back to its original appearance. When I originally saw the house, I thought, oh, it's painted black and orange because of Halloween, right? But on my recent visit, I learned that's just not the case. I was told by someone who works for the museum that the colors of the house were actually very carefully researched and that it's period accurate. As usual, I started out with a rough template for the building so I can figure out where all the windows and doors need to be, as well as the angles for the roof sloping. Using that as a guide, I laid out the shape of the terrain. The terrain generally follows the shape of the house, but with some extra added curves and angles to give it more of an organic shape. Underneath the terrain, I added a whole bunch of the 2x2 plates with the curved bottom. This helps to keep the bottom layer of plates together. Also, once finished, it makes moving and sliding the build around a whole lot easier. I'm always trying to improve my trees and make them look more realistic, but it's also important to make sure that they're structurally sound. Brick-built trees can tend to be a little fragile. For example, the tree on my witch house mock looks pretty good, but it falls over very easily. However, lately I have been experimenting with a new technique that does help make my trees much stronger. So when I put together my terrain, I add a Technic plate where I want the tree to be. I put it on the second layer of plates and leave a 2x2 open section on the very bottom. And then I put one or two more Technic plates on top of that in the opposite directions just to help strengthen the connections. And then I take a Technic axle, stick a bush piece on one end, and then I push the other end up through the plates. How big the axle is depends on how tall I want the tree trunk to be. Next, I slide some round 2x2 bricks over the axle, and this will ensure that the tree trunk is solid and can't just be knocked over. I'm using textured bricks here to help create the look of tree bark. And then over that, I add various flexible hoses and add some gray string to finish it all off. I used this same method for all of the trees that I brought up to Salem, and since they all made it in one piece after a 7-hour car ride, it seems to work pretty well. For the coloring of the leaves, I experimented with something a little different. I made gradients going from lighter greens to yellows to shades of orange, trying to depict leaves changing colors from the outside in. In the front, we have some seasonally appropriate jack-o'-lanterns and a little cat walking along the pathway. Towards the back, we have some cellar doors. The doors are made up of plates and tiles to give it a nice wood plank texture. And then they just drop right into place. Onto the house itself, I used the technique of alternating ingots and plates to mimic the siding texture. This is the same method that I used on the Ropes Mansion, although I must say it does work better on darker buildings so you see less of those little gaps in between the ingots. As for the orange accents, originally I was just going to use regular orange, but as I looked closer at the real building, the accents seemed to be more of a yellow orange, so I figured that maybe bright light orange would be a more suitable color. Although Bright Light Orange has a more limited selection of bricks, and the windows and door pieces that I would need aren't available in that color. So I ended up just using yellow for the windows and doors. But from a distance, the colors blend together and it's not all that noticeable that I'm using two different colors for the accents. Although the problem is, by the time I had made that decision, I had already bought all the orange pieces for the accents. But I guess I don't need those anymore. I used various pieces and techniques to mimic some of the ornate details of the orange accents from the real house. The roof is completely covered in 1x2 dark bluish gray tiles. But I did throw in some ingot pieces in there to give it a little bit of an extra texture. Beneath the roof sections, I put a lot of long bricks, and the reason for that is when you completely tile off a roof, it has a tendency to want to curve and bow, so by putting these bricks underneath the roof, it helps flatten it out. I aim to do something a little different with this chimney. I wanted to try to show the mortar in between the bricks, which isn't normally represented in my chimney builds. So I built up the chimney first with some tan bricks representing the mortar, and then over top of that I attached some tiles and ingots with the help of some snot bricks. I got a comment on my Lizzie Borden video that I should try adding some parchment paper over the windows so the house doesn't look so empty when it's lit up. I thought that was a really good idea, so for this mock I taped some tissue paper over the windows on the inside. And I gotta say, it really does help, not just with covering the emptiness of the interior, but it also helps diffuse the light and get rid of those hot spots. And if you want to see this mock in person, currently as of the time of this video, it is on display in Salem on Essex Street, courtesy of the Peabody Essex Museum, with many other of my Salem mocks. Now normally this is the part of the video where I add in a fun little animation using the mock I just showed you, but as I said, the mock is in Salem, so I don't have it here to take pictures and videos of an animation. In fact, I barely had enough time to take the pictures and the videos that I use for this video. So there will be no animation for this video, so I'm sorry if you enjoyed those, but please stay tuned for more spooky builds.